Bambu Lab A1 recall update, Uncle Jessy dealing with a box troll problem, some under-extrusion issues, and a Lithophane problem. All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 126. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here and you're struggling with getting your 3D printers running, you can reach out to us on all the social medias or email us directly, YouTube at 3dmusketeers.com. We want to help you getting back to printing with purpose. That is the purpose of PrintFix Friday, to help you keep your printers running longer and, well, kind of dealing with some of the more complicated issues, and simple ones as well, that might come up during your printing time. But I do want to update, before we get into fixing fails, the Bambu A1, now considered a recall. Bambu officially updated everything, and now we know it is a recall. It is occurring across every one of their resellers, retailers, and everything like that in between. And Bambu has now offered two options. One, return for a refund, which you will get 100% of the refund of your purchase back to you, and an $80 discount voucher for any other machines that you might want to buy. Of course, you could likely even wait for the new A1 when it is fixed. Yeah, you're gonna be without a printer for a little bit, but certainly that's the safest way. Option two is wait for Heatbed availability and replace it yourself. I want to be clear, and Bambu does actually talk about this. Also note that in some countries, due to regulations, the self-replacement of the bed by the consumer may not be an option. In this case, the only solution is to return the printer for a refund. Please check your local laws. I understand that you might find yourself to be a turbo geek and someone that knows how to do this or feels comfortable doing it. I would argue that the extra $40 voucher that Bambu is going to give you is not worth the liability risk that comes along with doing this type of work yourself. In countries like Australia and a fair bit of the EU, working on your own machine when it involves mains voltage is not legal unless you are a certified electrician. So please check your local laws, because I want to be clear, this was caught before it created any serious structure fires or loss of life. But if it does occur again, and you were the one that did the work, you really can't go after anybody other than yourself. You have nobody to blame but yourself for that, because you did the work yourself. You didn't wait for a actual manufacturer replacement, and instead did the fix yourself. Again, I know a lot of you want to do that. Please don't use the $40 as an incentive, because quite frankly, it just sounds like a great way to subvert the US consumer protection codes. But that's not for me to really go through. Nonetheless, guys, it's not worth 40 bucks. Get rid of the machines, get the 80 bucks off, and quite frankly, going to like a P1P, or honestly, in my opinion, a P1S for 80 bucks off, while it is a price jump, yeah, it's not gonna be the same price. It does significantly make life a little bit easier on your part, and you get a Core XY machine instead of a bed slinger with the same build volume. So that is, of course, if you want to stay within the Bambu ecosystem and you trust that Bambu doesn't have other problems like this in other machines. But we were posturing in the Discord what else could be done, and I said, well, it would be really nice if they could have a pop-up message. Apparently Bambu thought of that. This is really awesome to see from Matt Riley, Matt's Makerspace, and he said he's really pleased to see this happen. And so am I. So Bambu has, on the updated firmware for the A1, a pop-up that says your machine has been affected. You can scan a QR code for more details. This is great to see. Now, it doesn't solve it for anyone that's in an air-gapped environment or doesn't have access to internet for whatever reason, but it does kind of solve some of that problem. I guess really the only thing left is to potentially send a letter, which is what automakers would look at doing, because at that point, you've effectively covered every base that you would have. But I think it's reasonably fair to assume that owners of Bambu Lab A1s are likely not using them for business purposes, and if they are at least keeping in touch with Bambu Lab's social media stuff. So I think Bambu has done pretty much everything that we could ask for. Obviously, if we didn't have the first blog, and especially if we didn't have that leaked influencer email, I would be much happier with this response. I'm I'm not going to give them an A on this because an A would mean that we wouldn't have had the problem in the first place. So I'm going to go ahead and give Bambu like a B, B+ on this. I think it's a very appropriate response. I don't think we needed that first blog, and we certainly did not need the confusion that that influencer email caused, given a lot of the back and forth. And if you're wondering about all of that, you might have missed last week's PrintFixFriday. We'll card to it so you can take a look, but this is kind of an update to that situation and to make sure that we give credit where it's due. This is an actually decent response, and it's the first response of its type that I can think of from any manufacturer for 3D printers in this industry. Previously, manufacturers just tend to ignore the safety issues and do nothing about it, quietly solve the problem and move on without like making a public declaration. This is good to see. I just hope that we can kind of clean up the PR side when it comes to Bambu. But hey, credit where it's due. Good job for calling it a recall, making it official, and providing options for those that want them. Filament jammed. Is it possible to start a print again from a certain layer? It seems the printer didn't catch when the extrusion stopped, and it was printing about a 1/4 inch above the last completed layer when I paused it. Prusa Slicer, Elegoo Neptune 2S, printing Silk Shiny PLA from Amelin. In a case like this, really the only thing that you can do is like measure it, cut the part in the slicer, and then reprint what is left. You'll have to glue it together, and you're going to see an obvious seam line. So in my opinion, unfortunately, you gotta toss it and start all over. Silk PLA can be a bit of a challenge to actually print, and we actually know what it takes to make real quality silk filament when we made Jessy's Elixir with printed solid that I still want to be called Silver Fox. I don't know if I'm ever going to get my wish, but if I bother the printed solid peeps enough, maybe we'll sneak the name in. But silk filament utilizes TPU to make the shininess, and that TPU melts at a different temperature than your PLA, therefore creating more of a unique environment to print in, especially when you are extruding it and it cools down. Any of you that have extruded silk filament notice it kind of droops and then it sucks back up. That's because as it's cooling, it's shrinking quite a bit. And with a non-all-metal hot end on an older machine that is a Bowden printer, you can actually have die swell, where the material will swell inside of the PTFE tube and get jammed. It's why silk filament tends to be a bit of a problem to print, and often, hilariously, the solution is just to give it more heat. But yes, you could measure where it was in the slicer, cut it in the slicer, reprint it, glue it together. This being a dice tower, I would probably just start all over, unfortunately. I don't think you need as much infill as you have, because most of the strength in a 3D print comes from the perimeters anyways. I think you could easily reslice this and take it down to maybe 15 to 20%, maybe adaptive cubic infill to try to save some time and money where you can on the reprint, and hopefully that will also increase the print times, get this thing done a little bit faster. Hope it helps. Help with Lithophane banding. I printed my first ever Lithophane. Hey, that's awesome. And while when I hold it up to light, the quality is actually quite good, the banding is really extreme. I have never seen this at all really on any of my prints, certainly not anywhere close to this. This example is 0.12mm layers and 0.4mm nozzle. I oriented the print on the y-axis as instructed and cut my print speed way down. It took 12 hours to print this, so I don't think speed is the problem. I'm on an Ender V3 SE. So along the y-axis would be along the travel of the actual Cartesian printer. And this is it's just wiggle. So the part doesn't have a lot of contact with the build plate. So as the printer is moving left and right, it can also shift the part left and right, especially as it gets higher up. This is just an unfortunate issue with lithophanes, and I'm not exactly certain there's a great way to solve it other than making sure that you really have a good fat base layer, right? Lots of brim, hell, even printed base layers, maybe 1 or 2 layers thick, that act like the mouse ears, but just larger to help keep it steady. But I would also recommend that maybe we look away from doing vertical lithophanes anymore, move into something like HueForge, something that I've been messing with a little bit. It is a pretty steep learning curve, to be very clear and honest about that. But once you get it, my God, the things that it unlocks is pretty amazing. While it is not a free software, the paid versions start at quite an affordable rate, and if you do want to do lithophanes on a reasonably often time frame, pretty much this is going to be the best way to do it with HueForge. HueForge will actually print flat, and you would use something like a 0.08. That's an 80 micron layer, and that does print perfectly fine on a 0.4mm nozzle. Obviously, a machine with input shaping will do this much faster, right? We've been using our Cheaty X+3. We've also been using the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon. I've done some on the Prussias as well. And of course, the Prusia Mark III's without input shaping take a considerably longer amount of time, which is, you know, a bit of a problem if you're on a time schedule. But I would also argue that if you only have to do it once versus doing it a few times, well, that extra time is actually worth it. Looking at the dots and things that we see on the back, that is likely parts of the infill and extra perimeters that are done where you have extra thickness poking through. We'd also want to make sure that we bring our Z-seam to one of the corners. Just kind of hides it, makes it a little bit easier to print. That's where I would do. I would go with HueForge. And if you have any tips for HueForge, I'd love to know them down in those comments below, because I am still learning it. I want to do a video on it, but I don't want to do a video on it until I'm comfortable using it myself, so that we can kind of teach some basic tips and tricks. So if there's any that you have that you think might make my experience a lot easier, hey, toss them down there and I'd love to take a look. And hey, while you're down there, make sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't, and support us if that's your kind of thing financially via the links in that description down below. And we have tiers starting as low as $1. At the $10 tier, you get to come hang out with myself and the entire 3D Musketeers crew and our fans in our private Discord server, where we hang out multiple times a week, we help each other fix our printers, and we just kind of have a great time. I love that Discord, and hey, if it's your kind of thing and you got a couple of bucks to spare, we'd love to have you as well. I am getting random lines. I've been working on this problem for a couple of weeks now, so I will try to keep it short. I keep getting these random layer lines. I've done about everything that I know how to. Tighten my belts, clean and oil the rods, make sure all the screws were tight. I'm still new to the hobby. Any advice? So we can see here, we've got some pretty serious banding on the Z, and it looks like we also have some warping of our part. Red is just a really, really hard material to photograph. That looks okay. That is pretty rough on an area that wouldn't be, you know, somehow related to a warp. So let's kind of go through this. All right, so this is PLA. So warping is likely not going to be a problem, but I will say we do have indications of it lifting off the build plate here. The dark area is where it is still stuck. The non-dark area, the lighter area, is where the print has actually warped up from the build plate itself. Something to be aware of there. Now, this could be a little bit later on. Maybe the printer's cooled down and it started to release from the build plate. I'm not 100% sure, so I can't assume there. Being PLA, it's unlikely to warp anyways, but something to be aware of just in case. With this, I would make sure to check those Z lead screws. I would home the printer and then run the Z all the way up and see, does it appear that it is skipping? Does it appear that it's not level? All of that could result in some sort of binding that is occurring on that lead screw. I'd also check to make sure your lead screws don't have any crap on them, because while you say it's random, it looks like it's not all that random. It is randomly occurring, but where it is occurring seems not to be random, and instead is actually on a reasonable pattern here. I would want to check with some calipers to make sure that the part is actually the right height and it is a consistent height across the part. If it's not, it's absolutely a mechanical issue and we can get that sorted. On the Prussias, the motor for the lead screw is also the lead screw. So if you wanted to check that, you would have to actually drop the entire motor and lead screw assembly out and then roll it across a table. Obviously, the motor have to be hanging off the table, then you can roll the lead screw and see, is the lead screw bent at all? It's not impossible, but it's also not a very common thing that we see. So I don't know if I would be tearing apart my machine right now. I'd be looking to see, does it have some sort of axis misalignment where the Z is trying to move up, but then eventually kind of binds, fixes itself, and then rebinds over and over and over again. With the Mark III's, send it all the way up. It will likely contact the top of the printer, and that will force it to be relatively level for when you go back and home it. Give that a shot and see if that helps. I think this is mechanical, because otherwise we've got some really loose screws somewhere that are enabling the hot end itself to wiggle around. I don't think that's the problem. It's a very uncommon problem, especially given the way that the Mark III's holds the hot end. You'd have to have a lot of things wrong for that to wiggle, but it's not impossible. Next up, a fail from my buddy, Uncle Jessy.
In the heck happened in here?
Supports failed. That's absolutely failed supports. I know that 100%. You got some support issues.
I mean, it's still printing, so I guess that's good.
Good enough.
I don't know. This is a massive multi-day print here. And after 41 hours, this massive print
That's a big
is
print.
all finished. Let's get it off the bed here. Oh my.
Okay, for those of you that have never met Uncle Jessy in person, he's not a small guy. And he's actually got some good muscle on him too. He is struggling to remove this print. A+ for bed adhesion on the Elegoo Neptune 4 something. I'm not 100% sure what machine this is, but good bed adhesion.
Oh my God, it's so heavy. Yeah. I legit can't get this off the bed. The magnet. It's because it's so stuck and flat here. I need to. There we go.
Oh,
This thing is huge. There's another one that I
big friggin'
Still
print.
no idea what happened with all these supports.
So what occurred there, and it's something that we see when you don't have great support base layer connection, or you have your support base layers with too much gap, where they just don't stick to the bottom of the part where they need to stick to, and instead they kind of just turn into spaghetti. The thing is, support tends to find a way. It doesn't take a lot for support to kind of build up on random bits of spaghetti and actually fix itself. I've had it happen, and I'm sure you guys have had something similar happen before. Sometimes support just finds a way.
Why they didn't adhere inside the mouth, but all of the teeth ended up printing. So it looks like maybe I didn't even need the supports to begin with.
Maybe.
And yeah, just need to get this a little bit cleaned up and ready to go.
Oh no! We lost the bottom of the fingers. This is a pretty common issue. We see this when you're running your printers very fast without the best cooling in the world, where the actual underside of, like, you know, a dome, right? A finger pad is basically a dome at this point, that it can either get knocked off or it just won't attach very well. We can even see on the finger down here where it did stay attached, we do have some layer separation. We have some layer separation there where the layer above it didn't really connect to the layer below it. If you wanted to, you could cut the new finger pads and, you know, reprint them and solve it, but I don't know if it's worth it.
And how do you think I should plug those holes on this huge troll?
I'm gonna let you guys let me know how you would plug the holes in that troll in the comments below, because I am way too immature to give a legitimate answer for that. But no, seriously, I don't know if I would bother. Depending on where this part is going, you might not even see that. And if you're not going to see it, then I wouldn't really worry about it. If this is for a client project of some sort, obviously, unfortunately, this entire part has to get reprinted. But Uncle Jessy, you know what you did there. This happens. It's a very common problem that we see, and you can solve it by having more infill, more perimeters, but I get on a part this large, you're not going to want to do that because it's going to want to take up a ton of time and materials. It's where you could look at kind of splitting off those fingers, printing them separately, and then gluing them together with something like 3D Gloop, which is my favorite sticky stuff that we use on our prints here. We like the nano bottles just because they're easier, and when I accidentally knock them over, it's not like 30 bucks of chemical solvent going all over the table. And Gloop is pretty strong. We've actually battled against 3D Gloop and their robot, Jeff, at 3D Printopia or East Coast Rep Fest 2023. We'll card to that video so you guys can take a look. Yeah, if you're not going to see it, I wouldn't even bother fixing it, man. It's not that big of a deal. And if you do want to plug it so you don't end up with like moisture or something in there, a little bit of expanding foam, heck, a 3D printing pen just to cover it up, some hot glue, something generic will cover that and make it so it's not just an open hole in the part. Otherwise, part looks pretty good. Looks like we might have some top layer issues there, but nothing some new settings won't fix either. Strains lines on top layer. This prop firearm, it is a prop. It is very obviously from some sort of fandom or whatever. This is not a functional thing. I'm looking at you, YouTube. It is split in half horizontally, printed flat on the bed of an Anycubic Cobra Max 2. Top surface lines, thoughts. So let's take a look at these top surface lines that we got here. We are over extruding. So we can certainly see some ridging in between the layers. That is going to be some over extrusion. This would be one of those cases where using Orca Slicer would be so much better. When you're trying to have text on the top of a model, having just one perimeter for it will make it look so much better rather than having a bunch of little perimeters, because the way a printer prints the perimeters versus the way it does the infill, they look different. This print does look good, but it is absolutely over extruded a little bit. Interestingly though, we can see that we have some areas where the infill doesn't connect to the actual perimeter. So we might have a little bit of wiggling going on with the machine too. Let's check those belts, make sure they're not loose. Let's check the bed. I think the Cobra Max 2 has springs, even though it's auto bed leveling. Let's make sure those springs aren't too loose, allowing the bed to shift. And then let's retune our steps per millimeter. To do that, measure out 100 millimeters of filament before it goes into the hot end, make a mark, extrude 100 millimeters filament, see where that mark is. If the mark is inside the extruder you're over extruding, you can figure out that math differential. There's online calculators. We'll link to one in the description down below, and you can kind of dial it in. You could also just, you know, lower your extrusion multiplier. That would work too. I would kind of lower it in like 0.5% increments and see how that goes. It's just going to take you a little bit to figure it out. The other option here is to print the parts vertically, where you will get better resolution because you're dealing with your 0.2 millimeter layers for that resolution rather than having to stack layers on top of each other. So your over extrusion won't be as obvious in my opinion. However, it will require some level of support, but it does look like, kind of looking at the piece back there, that we have some issues with our cooling as well. I would love to see more information on this. I'm kind of missing a lot of the info that I would like to see on a part like this, but I do hope it helps. These look like they're a pretty nice set of prop blasters, maybe some sort of lever action or something going on there, but honestly, it looks like it could just be over extrusion, maybe a little bit of cooling as well. And hey, if you do want to join the cooling crew, is that a great way to call them? Probably not, but I'm rolling with it anyways. You too can support us at the $5 tier and higher, get your name and lights right next to me. Stay tuned for the outtake on this, because this is not the first time I filmed this video. The first time we had some pretty serious corruption issues on the file, so I'm doing this right before I have to stream on Wednesday. Huh? Do appreciate any support you guys have. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones, and as always, click the videos below me and keep making awesome. Have a good one. Musketeers.com. We want to help you getting back to printing with purpose. And hey, if you do want to support, nope.